Good afternoon. Welcome to Voices of the North. I am Darlene Phillips, your host, and today my special guest is Thomas Berry. How are you doing, Thomas?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
All right. What I would like to lead out with is, can you please tell us the name of your organization? What type of work do you do? And how long have you been doing your work?
Well, I work in many organizations. I work for Village Arms, which is the organization that focuses on child protection services. The African American Family Preservation Act is the bill that our director, Khalees Houston, authored. I've been working there for about 3 years. Started off my other job with Black Civic Network with Nick Muhammad, who is the executive director over there. I'm the program director over there. We met Khalees. And we talked to her about the bill she was working on. And we just wanted to help her out because nobody would talk to her. Like none of the organizations locally would help her with this bill about black children. And we both, myself and Nick, are fathers. And we're seeing this young lady who has no children, passionate about this bill. And when she got to explaining the bill to us, going over the data about, only 2% of the children are sexually molested that are removed from homes. Only 9% are physically abused. So that's the abuse part right there. Mm-hmm. The other 89% of the children removed. It's pretty much if the social worker feels that the children are in danger, they can make that call and remove them. So as fathers, and, our children not being a part of the system, we felt like, it was mandatory that we take Black Civic Network and help her out. Well, in the process of helping her out, I started working more closely with her because Nick was like, well, I got to man the organization. You're the program director. You go ahead and find out exactly what's going on over there with this bill. I need you to know all the details so you can go back and train the staff. And the more I worked with her, the more I got in depth, started doing presentations and things for her. And then she brought me on and said, all right, well, listen, I want to start this up. We got a pilot program with the county, but you've been walking with me every step of the way, and I want you to keep this walk with me. Can we work this out? Mm-hmm. So then I told her and Nick, well, listen, my arms are wide enough. I'm going to work between both of y'all. I work with Black Civic Network, keep my duties over there, but I also will stay with this sister and make sure she has all the support possible.
Okay. Do you think that at some part of this, before you got to actually working with the organizations, would you say that there was an event that occurred in your life before you got there to lead you toward that path of working?
Well, for me, I've always been an advocate for African Americans since I had a chance to speak as a teenager. Mm-hmm. So I've always been an advocate about racial discrimination and things of that nature. I've always been very passionate. Coming from where I'm from, it's the haves and the have-nots, and it's the black and the white. So my hometown of South Bend, Indiana, where you're from, it's hey, listen, it's real segregated. So, when I came to Minnesota, I was kind of shocked on how comfortable black people here with white people. Mm-hmm. And I used to be like, man, y'all just super comfortable with them because back home, they'll call you a nigga in a minute. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And it was like really and they're like, yo, you act like you were born in the 60s. I'm like, no, man, I'm talking about 89, 90. They still would call you those things. So for me, I think it was more so just moving up here, watching how people here were so blind to it all, that I was like, man, I got to be on my P's and Q's because these folks, our own people, they don't pay attention to it, And so coming where we from, I just had to say, hey, man, let me just pay attention. So I think that just watching what was going on with older people and kind of like, as a kid, you ear hustle a lot, you hear what's going on. And so you knew families were struggling here and you knew that children were being removed, but I didn't get the whys. I didn't get the whys. But so when it presented itself, it was like, oh.
This is what's happening.
This is what's happening. This is what was going on all of those years ago when I was a teenager.
Okay. Tell me what your concerns are about the Child Protective Service and the racial disparities that you see that is involved with that system.
Well, the first thing is it's too much money going into the removal of black children from homes, $550 million annually. So when you take a look at those dollar amounts and you say, well, there's laws that put in place that's supposed to be before they remove a child out of the home or from the family, they're supposed to look for kin support first. Then they're supposed to look for ethnic support, like someone you're saying race or ethnicity. And what I've noticed was that when I was helping her was they were like bypassing all of that. So they would just pull you out the house, and kids would end up inside of Mankato or inside of, North Branch. And one of the things that really caught my attention was I was doing some work with DHS. They were working on this bill called Family First. And they were going to emphasize this thing would keep the family together, whatever. A supervisor pulled me aside, a white supervisor. And she said, "Hey, I want to show you something." She showed me this map. And she said, "This is where all of the major, foster care, big places are at, right? These are all the group homes for foster care." And she said, "If you look at this map, it's the exact same place where all the prisons are at." And she said, "So you got to understand," this is a white woman talking to me, this is very systematic. And we've been trying to change this for a while, but we have a lot of stubborn people who don't want to change this. And so looking at that and then seeing the money that was poured into it, that $550 million going into white hands, it's sustaining a lot of communities. As a matter of fact, during those meetings, I would ask questions like, "Hey, what's the average amount of times a child could be placed from home to home after they're removed from their family?" The state of Minnesota has no way of tracking that. They said it could be 1 to 100 until they age out. They don't know. And not only don't they know, the statistics of children being abused physically as well as sexually gets higher when they remove for foster care. And here's another kicker, because we always hear this thing in our community about the school to prison pipeline. Well, 70% of the children or the juveniles who are committing crime in the Twin Cities have at one point or another been dealing with child protection service or out of home placement. So just removing our children out of the home away from the parents is almost like an introduction to the system that's going to ride them right on into prison. So the more that I saw this, and mind you, my main job is the program director of Black Civic Network. We're trying to fight these disparities on other levels. And then you're looking at this and you're saying, wait a minute, hold on. So they get these children at an adolescent state, and then they make the disparities more of a generational thing from generation to generation, right? Like I said generational, but not generational, it's what we call a legacy. So if you were removed from your family, typically your children will be removed from their family, and then their children will be removed from their family. That's how it goes, right? And so while I was seeing that and the disparities, I started noticing that our children, for the slightest things, would be removed. And if you can juxtapose it with white families, those children get time after time after time after time. Now, the irony of it is it was a white male who got killed by his parents around 2013, 2014. They use that as a reason on why they've been going so hard. But when you really get down and you do the work, and you see in situations where there's a black father, white mother, white father, black mother, it's even discrimination in that. The white father can be high on meth 24/7. The black mother may not be high on nothing. They're going to make her take all the drug tests. And they're going to do everything they can to, if he loses his parental rights, they're going to make sure she loses her parental rights. If the black father is doing everything right, he may never get that child if he got a white mother. Matter of fact, the rates are so high. And I'm only bringing this up because, this is a very biracial place here. And there's a lot of biracial children here inside of the foster care system, by the way. Right? And part of that is because, it's a level of those biracial children can pass for the relatives of the foster parents. Right?
Right.
And if they look like us, after some point, they stop being cute and cuddly. So then they put them out in the street. And then they sit inside of these homes that are out there, or these group homes that are out there by the prisons. And so all of that information right there got me fueled up. Like, I'm like, nah, man, we got to get into this fight. We can't ignore that. My kids could never tell you what it's like to even be in a conversation with a child protection service worker. But I feel like that ain't because I'm great as a father. I feel like, we had a program, we had a plan, but I also felt like we were lucky in a lot of ways because a lot of these families are not failed families. In some instances, it's the schools calling because they have a grudge with the mother. Mom might have called and cussed the teacher out. Now the teacher calling Child Protection Services for something else. You go to the hospital, and children is notorious for calling. Matter of fact, if you smoke marijuana, soon as you give birth, they running a drug test on you. Mm-hmm. You go in because you got contractions, they're running a drug test on you. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of like, for years, I was kind of upset with Abbott because with my oldest boy, we were thinking his mom was going into labor. So we go to the hospital, and the first thing they asking us, do y'all smoke weed? And we're like, we talking about she about to go in labor. Why y'all asking us, do we smoke weed? But to come to find out, that's the question that they typically ask so they could trigger Child Protection Service investigation. So if I or her or she says, yes, we've been smoking marijuana, trying to, tell your doctor, and you think that, by some Hippocratic oath, they can't tell anybody anything. No, they on that phone calling Child Protection Services like, yeah, we got these weed heads down here. Come check this baby out.
So at any point, like when CPS is called, the Child Protective Service, whether it be at the school, the hospital, I was always under the impression one of the leading statements for Child Protective Service was, our goal is to keep the family together. We'll just give you this service plan of action that you need to do. Mm-hmm. You have to take parenting classes. Mm-hmm. You have to submit yourself to these drug tests. You have to submit yourself to a psychological evaluation. Mm-hmm. And then we're supposed to be keeping our family together. But for me, just listen to what you're saying, this system has been designed to dissolve the black family just as bad as a generational curse. You keep removing and removing and removing till you don't have anything. So that line about we're designed to keep them together, that doesn't apply to the black family.
It doesn't apply to any family, especially black, when it comes to them being able to sell your children off like cattle. And so it's plantation politics. Like, it's just pretty much, think about the plantation where you don't have any rights as a parent to the child that you birthed as a mother or father. You can also sell the father off to another plantation. They're good at that too. Mm-hmm. So they're good at telling parents. I've had parents who lost their children to an accident that they were driving in, and they've told the father that he couldn't even show up to the funeral. And if he did, they were going to take the rest of the kids. I've had situations where excuse me, they made allegations about the dad that was unfounded. Mm-hmm. And they told him he can't be in the house. And if so, they coming to get the rest of the children. And I mean, they're not trying to keep the family together. Like, they want to implode the family as much as possible. And all those things that excuse me, that they are saying about the psychological test, about the classes. First thing that you have to understand is they're not medical professionals. Mm-hmm. So they're not even in a position to question your psyche. You can go far up the chain in Child Protection Services as you want. There's no doctors, nurses, or anything on board. Very few therapists are sitting high on the chart. So when they say these things, they have no expert opinion, but it is things to make you jump through those hoops so you'll quit and say, man, F those kids and leave them where they at.
Okay. Is there what type of support do you think this organization needs from the community?
We need the community to just do a couple things. First thing is just dig on in, man. When you see Child Protection Services with a family member, don't gossip about that person. Those people probably didn't do anything wrong. It's a great time for the family to step in, ask to meet with the Child Protection Service people at the same time so that you don't leave your family member alone. Mm-hmm. You got to remember, they're dealing with a system. If they're dealing with a system, the only thing that can help your family member is the family. The family is a system. What we need more so support for is with the African American Family Preservation Act. We're looking to get people to come out as much as possible with helping passing this bill. You can go to villagearms.org and volunteer to support the bill. It's very important because we got a lot of parameters in that bill where It puts restraints on social workers from lying on family members. We're looking to get them terminated and even prosecuted for that. That's been one of the major pushbacks on the bill. As a matter of fact, the DHS have went behind our back while we're pushing the bill and told legislators to block the bill. So this bill has been around for at least 5 years, and it's like a dogfight because these people want their right to their slaves.
Grassroots in action, mobilize and educate on getting out to vote. We do phone banks to try to promote the voting for our community. Can you please tell me, why do you think it's important for people to get out and vote?
Well, the first thing is you got to vote. I tell people this is my tag. It's two things I think African Americans especially should be paying attention to. Our ancestors died for your right to vote and your right to be married. Your family, like when we talk about the right and people dying, I ain't talking about the civil rights. I'm talking about folks on the plantation who fought to get free. They fought to make sure that you have the right to this American access. So you need to vote. You need to cast that vote because you can change those laws. And we see other communities getting more mobilized and activated than we are. You have to get out there and vote. And those allies out there, you need to vote too. You can't necessarily see us out there with the door knocking and getting people involved and saying, well, they got it. No, you need to come and lift this weight with us as well.
Okay. Thomas, do you have any concerns as far as North Minneapolis goes, as far as like the violence inside North Minneapolis? Do you see any concerns or changes or solutions?
Well, I could tell you the problems and the solutions all at the same time. The very first problem that I think that we have is the disparities in the lack of access to capital. Because without that capital, you can't buy a home. If you can't buy a home, you can't leave that generational wealth to family. At least if you got a shelter over your head, that's a big start. So if you always got a family home somewhere to lay your head, you could do everything else from there. Think about the first thing they ask you for a job is you got to have a place to stay to even put on the application, right? So imagine not being able to own a home. I just saw a family today over north sleeping on a bench, right? And they were sleeping on the bench this morning. Now, we got to ask ourselves, why do we have so much violence? Why do we have so much poverty in the area where we're highly concentrated on? The main thing is the destruction of the family. If we kept our family units tight and we really talked about how we could build wealth, how we could take all the services and the capabilities that we had and work together, I think we can lick poverty within a 10 to 15 year sector. But we just have to focus on us and keep the dollars in our community.
Okay. At this time, I would like to say thank you so much for coming in and interviewing with us today. And if there's another time that you have an issue that you would like to address, you are more than welcome to come back to Voices of the North. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you all.